I am happy. Her voice still lingers in my mind, echoing across the dark corners of what used to be my pride. I replay that moment, the way Rachel stood in the living room, gazing out the window as if she were staring at a bright and perfect future. She had turned to me and said those 3 words, so simple and innocent. But now they make my skin crawl. I am happy. I can't help but hear them taunting me, reminding me how blind I was, how foolish I'd become in those final days of ignorance. I remember thinking, she's my wife. We built everything together. For nearly 2 decades, I believed we were living the life we always wanted. Nice house, decent neighborhood outside Cleveland, a comfortable routine of dinners at 6, weekend barbecues with old college friends, and occasional trips to the lakeside. Maybe it sounds ordinary, but ordinary was always enough for me. Except that day when she said, I am happy. Her eyes sparkled with a brightness I hadn't seen in a long time. I thought she'd found some new perspective on life, perhaps a renewed appreciation for what we had. I even congratulated myself. Michael, you've done well. You've provided. You've stayed loyal. But I was too complacent to notice the shadows flickering behind her smile. That memory is now disgusting because I see it with new eyes, the eyes of a man who knows the truth. I see the small details I ignored, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, trying to hide an involuntary smile, the slight flush in her cheeks that had nothing to do with me. And then, if I dare watch it again in my mind, I see my own face, trusting, unsuspecting, confident in the facade we called a marriage. Trust, I used to say, is the bedrock of love. Now I see that it can be something else, an unsharpened knife you hand over to the person closest to you, the one who can plunge it into your back at the worst possible moment. Trust is a weapon in the hands of those who know how to twist it. It started at my mother's birthday party, one of those early evenings where lights are soft and laughter comes easily. I was supposed to be there on time, but I got stuck in traffic after meeting a difficult client at the financial firm where I work. By the time I arrived, the house was already filled with the hum of voices and the pleasant aroma of homemade cooking. My mother adored hosting these events, always saying, "A home should be full of warmth, Michael, especially on special days." She was turning 65, and I wanted to surprise her. I didn't go through the front door. Maybe that was my first mistake, or maybe it was some half-conscious urge to see what was happening inside. She had told me, "Just come in, don't knock, your family." But as I walked around to the side, I glimpsed something through the window, something that seemed so out of place, I nearly convinced myself my eyes were playing tricks. Rachel was there, in the living room, talking to a man. Not just talking. The closeness was off. Too close. It was the contractor who had worked on my mother's roof a few months back, Stephen Bryant. He was the typical traveling handyman, the kind who shows up in his pickup truck with a dog-riding shotgun. I remembered him as polite, a quiet fellow who did his job well and left without fuss. The day he finished the roof, Rachel had offered him iced tea. They talked in the backyard for a bit while I was at the office. At the time, it seemed harmless. In my mind, it was just a kind gesture from my wife to a laborer. But there, behind that window, their body language told a different story. Rachel's hand brushed against his arm. His eyes lingered on her. She gave him a look I recognized from long ago, when she used to be enamored with me, back in the early days of our courtship. It was the softness in her eyes, a gentle half-smile, the tilt of her head, a quiet invitation for more. Then, as he spoke, she giggled. She barely giggles like that anymore, I thought. My heart started hammering, but I told myself, don't jump to conclusions. Don't be crazy. So I took a breath, forced a smile, and walked around to the front door. A few minutes later, I was inside, hugging my mother, hearing the routine greetings from relatives, inhaling the sweet sense of comfort I usually felt in her home. Rachel was across the room, talking with people from church. She caught my eye and waved at me, perfectly casual, perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. Later, while everyone laughed and ate, she slipped out to the kitchen. I followed, thinking I'd help with dessert or just be near her. I found her whispering into her phone instead. She saw me, startled. I tried to ignore the anxiety in her eyes. She quickly pocketed the phone and offered a broad, practiced grin. "Hey, honey," she said. "Where've you been?" I murmured something about traffic and stepped closer, trying to be affectionate. She accepted my hug, but there was a rigidity to her posture. Then we served the pie, made small talk, and the party went on like nothing was wrong. The blow came later, out of nowhere. A relative, maybe an aunt or cousin, I can't recall, pulled up a video message on her phone for my mother. It was some happy birthday greeting from an unexpected guest, someone who couldn't be there in person. The phone was passed around, eventually making its way to me. I pressed play. The image on the screen was that same man, Stephen, smiling widely into the camera, saying, "Hello from me and Rachel Anderson. We both wanted to wish you a wonderful birthday." My mouth went dry. He gave a gentle laugh, then said something else about how gracious and welcoming Mom had been. Something inside me recoiled. Rachel and me. They'd recorded a joint video. It was obviously planned, but I hadn't known about it. He winked at the camera before the video ended. Mom was delighted. "That's so sweet," she said. "He's a nice young man, isn't he? And your wife's so thoughtful." I felt the floor shifting under my feet. I looked at Rachel, who was now oddly still in the corner. She forced a casual smile that avoided my eyes. It was a moment. A pivot. My life was no longer what I thought it was. I wanted to confront her, to drag her out into the hall and demand an explanation. But the environment was too crowded, too full of unsuspecting, joyous relatives. I was the good son. I'd never ruin Mom's birthday. So I swallowed it all. The tension, the swirl of anger, confusion, betrayal. I plastered on a fake grin until I could slip away. The day after the party, I couldn't rest. I went to work, but every spreadsheet, every conversation with a client, blurred with the question, what the hell was that video? I told myself, calm down, you're overthinking. Maybe it was a friendly gesture, but the memory of them standing too close in the living room, her hand on his arm, those images wouldn't let me go. That evening, I came home to a house that felt strangely unfamiliar. The walls seemed to watch me, as if they held secrets. Rachel was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The aroma of chicken and vegetables filled the space. Normally, that smell would warm my heart, but now it made my stomach churn with unresolved tension. I approached her carefully. "Hey," I said, my voice taut. "About last night. That video message. Why didn't you tell me you two made something for Mom?" She kept her back to me, stirring the pot. "It was last minute. Stephen offered to record something since he likes your mother, and we thought she'd enjoy it. I just forgot to mention it. Just forgot." She lowered the heat on the stove, then turned off the burner. "Look, can we not do this now? I'm exhausted." Her words, her attitude, the casual dismissal, something snapped inside me. But I swallowed my reaction, forcing myself to remain composed. The pain of silence, I thought. It was safer to hold it in. So I changed the subject, asked about her day, tried to see if she'd betray any sign of guilt. She offered shallow answers, her eyes flicking to the clock on the wall. When dinner was done, we ate mostly in silence. She excused herself early to go upstairs, leaving me alone at the table. My appetite vanished. I had never been the type to pry into her things. We had always valued mutual respect and boundaries. But that night, after she fell asleep, I found myself creeping down to her home office, scanning the surfaces, her laptop, her phone, charging on the desk. My hand trembled. I told myself, "You have the right to know." But I hesitated to unlock it. There was a line in my mind, a line that read, "Once you cross this, there's no going back." I typed in her password. She told me it before, in case of emergencies. My heart pounded as the screen opened to her messages. At first, I only saw mundane conversations, clients asking about wedding receptions, family members discussing groceries. I was ready to close it, feeling guilty, when I noticed an unfamiliar thread, a string of messages from someone labeled S. My stomach tightened. I clicked it. The conversation was explicit in its emotional undertones. Some lines were flirty, others more than flirty. Lines about meeting up, about how that night was incredible, about how I can't stop thinking of you, and references to me, but never by name, merely as your husband, always in hushed, careful language. The word roof came up. The memory slammed into my mind. Stephen, the contractor who worked on the roof, who had shared a too-close moment at my mom's party. Rachel had been hooking up with him. No, not just hooking up. She was confiding in him, telling him her thoughts, her dissatisfaction, her unfulfilled desires, describing a frustration with me, a need for excitement. There were lines with erotic undertones, descriptions of how she felt in his arms, how she wanted more. In my chest, something collapsed. I stared at the words, reading them over and over, my vision blurring. The trust I'd carried around for so many years felt like it had been used to strangle me. Everything about our life. The illusions of stability, companionship, love, disintegrated in the space of a few typed lines. The house was silent, but inside my head I was screaming. I copied the messages, screenshots, storing them on a flash drive. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but I needed proof for myself. Then I put her phone back the way I had found it. I climbed the stairs, my legs trembling, and walked into our bedroom. She was on her side, breathing softly, hair splayed across the pillow, looking peaceful as if nothing in the world was wrong. For a moment, I watched her. She's the woman I loved, I thought. She's the same person who said, I do. But now, I didn't recognize her at all. Days passed, each one more suffocating than the last. I found myself searching for concrete evidence, for closure on what I suspected. Then, one afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. I'd wrapped up a meeting ahead of schedule. I didn't announce my arrival, stepping quietly through the front door. The house was too still, yet I sensed some presence. There was a faint rustling from upstairs, the creak of a floorboard. My pulse throbbed in my throat. I moved slowly, like a man in a dream. Down the hallway, up the steps, approaching the partially open bedroom door. Then I heard her voice, low and breathy, filled with a tone I hadn't heard in years. The tone of a woman fully engaged, a soft moan. The blood pounded so fiercely in my ears I thought I'd go deaf. Through the crack of the door, I saw them. Rachel and Stephen were tangled in our sheets, the curtains drawn, the afternoon light filtering through in jagged beams. It wasn't a subtle entanglement. It was a moment of raw intimacy. Her fingers laced in his hair, her head arched back, his hands gripping her waist. My stomach lurched at the sight. The bed we once shared, the bed that symbolized our union, was now the stage for this betrayal. The air was thick with the musk of sweat and sex. For an instant, I couldn't move. Rage, heartbreak, and a sickening wave of jealousy surged in me. The erotic tension in that room wasn't for me. It was for him. A man who had strutted in under my nose. My hands trembled, and I felt this overwhelming urge to burst through the door, to rage, to throw him out the window and scream at her for turning our life into this grotesque scene. But I found myself stepping back, pressing against the hallway wall, covering my mouth to stifle a cry that threatened to escape my lips. The pain of silence, that's what I felt. A silent, searing agony that shot through every part of me. Some might have confronted them right then. Maybe that's what a braver or more impulsive man would do. But I felt paralyzed, and something told me I needed to see it in full, to let it brand itself on my memory so there'd be no more denial. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening to every muffled breath and whispered name. Then I left. I left my own house, my own life, as if it had been taken over by strangers. I sat in my car across the street, gripping the steering wheel, watching the front door. Eventually he emerged, looking casual as he walked to his truck. Rachel appeared briefly in the doorway, wearing a robe, her hair messy. They exchanged a last, suggestive smile before he drove off. I didn't go back inside that day. I couldn't. I went for a drive, circled the block aimlessly, ended up on a nearby highway, windows down, letting the wind batter my face. I had no plan, no anchor. My trust in her had been used against me like a knife, cutting deeper than I'd thought possible. I found myself in a roadside diner hours later, staring at a cold cup of coffee, my mind a chaotic mess. A week passed. I kept my distance. I slept on the couch, barely spoke more than a sentence at a time. Rachel looked uneasy, but she didn't bring it up. Then, one evening, I decided it was time. No more illusions, no more half-truths. I wanted her to confess in her own words, to see if she had the courage to admit what she'd done. She was in the kitchen, finishing the dishes. I stood behind her, my arms folded. The sink was still running, the water pouring over plates. She noticed my reflection in the window above the sink and turned off the tap. "Michael?" she asked quietly, as if sensing the tension in the air. I didn't speak at first. I reached into my back pocket and placed my flash drive on the counter. She glanced at it, puzzled. "What's that?" "Proof," I said, my voice low. "Go ahead, look at it. It's a copy of the messages. Between you and your contractor friend." She went pale, her hands trembling slightly. You went through my phone." "Yes," I said. "Yes, I did." Silence swallowed the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. She stared at the flash drive, like it might burst into flames. She started to speak, but words failed her. "You've been sleeping with him," I whispered, stepping closer. "In my house. In our bed." She lowered her head, but then, as if gathering courage, she looked up. Her eyes glistened. "I can explain." "Explain? Go ahead," I said flatly. She swallowed. "It just happened. After he came to fix the roof at your mom's house, we got to talking. I don't know. I felt alive around him. Something I haven't felt in years." I repeated her words, more softly, as if tasting poison. "You felt alive." My lips barely moved. The echo made her flinch, as though I had slapped her. "Yes." She inhaled, tears welling up. "I am sorry. God, Michael. I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't want to hurt me," I said, my voice trembling with sarcasm. "Yet you did it anyway, over and over." She was crying now, her tears creating streams down her cheeks. "I felt like I was suffocating," she said. "You were always so stable. Good. But I needed excitement. You never saw that part of me. You never asked." I repeated, quieter than before. "I never asked." She grimaced, shaking her head. "I'm not blaming you. I'm just—" "How long?" I interrupted. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" She closed her eyes, tears escaping. "About 2 months." 2 months, I repeated. The words tasted bitter. She reached out, trying to touch my arm. I pulled back. Anger flared inside me. Then pity. Then shock. My emotions whipsawed from one to the other. My heart hammered. "Rachel," I said, voice tight, "why stay with me at all? Why not just leave if I'm so inadequate?" She stared at me, eyes pleading. I thought it was just a phase. I didn't want to blow up our life for a fling. And yes, I was selfish. I was weak. Her honesty cut deeper than any lie. But it also ripped open a raw wound that had been festering inside me. I tried to remain stone-faced, but my anger spilled over. "You should have left," I growled. "You should have told me the truth before parading your lover through my mother's birthday party, letting him speak to her like he was part of the family." She sobbed, covering her face with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk this through? Can we?" I slammed my fist on the counter, making the flash drive jump. Don't you see? You've destroyed everything. Our trust. Our marriage. For what? Her shoulders shook as she tried to steady her breath. I still love you, Michael. I do. This was a stupid, reckless thing. I'm begging you. Let's figure. She was in good spirits, wanting to talk about her birthday, still thrilled about the video message from that wonderful young man. My stomach turned when she mentioned him. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but she noticed something was off. You're not yourself, Michael, she said gently, motioning for me to sit in the living room. The same living room where I'd first seen Rachel and Stephen sharing that intimate moment of closeness. I hesitated. Mom had always been my rock, but telling her about Rachel's infidelity. The last thing I wanted was for her to feel guilt or heartbreak because of my wife's betrayal. So I lied, said work was stressful. She nodded but gave me a keen look that said she didn't entirely believe me. She didn't press. Before I left, she placed a hand on my shoulder. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? I tried to summon a small smile. I know, Mom. She looked at me like she wanted to say more, but then let me go. As I drove away, that nauseous feeling twisted in my gut. Part of me wished I could spill everything, watch her console me the way mothers do. But I couldn't handle seeing the disappointment in her eyes. Your wife cheated with a man I welcomed into my home, I imagined her saying. How could she? I couldn't bear that reality. Not yet. Trust is a weapon, I told myself. If I feigned acceptance, if I let Rachel think we could work this out, maybe I could lure her into a false sense of security. Then I'd strike. But how? I'm not violent by nature. I've never thrown a punch except in a high school scuffle. Yet the desire for retribution gnawed at my insides. I wanted to see Stephen break, to watch him realize he'd meddled in the wrong marriage. And I wanted Rachel to feel the raw shame of what she'd done. I started with small manipulations. One morning, I suggested we go see a counselor. She looked surprised but nodded, tears of relief in her eyes, as if hoping we could salvage something. Then the night before our scheduled session, I canceled it. I apologized, claimed I had an emergency at work. She looked crestfallen, but she swallowed it. Then, I insisted we rebook. She seemed grateful again, only for me to cancel at the last minute a second time. I watched her confusion grow, saw her question whether I was truly trying or if I was punishing her. I kept the answers vague, said I was conflicted. Meanwhile, I gathered more evidence. Phone logs, text messages, even financial records of her clandestine meetups, hotel receipts, restaurant bills hidden under her name. I compiled them in a folder, methodically, like a detective building a case. Each piece of evidence cut me anew, but it also fueled a dark satisfaction. She wants to betray me. Fine. Let me show her how it feels to be trapped. At one point, I considered confronting Stephen directly, threatening him, maybe even swinging a bat at his prize truck. But a cold logic told me that wouldn't be enough. Physical violence might bring a fleeting sense of power, but it wouldn't erase the betrayal festering inside my heart. So I kept quiet, forcing myself to act polite if we ever crossed paths. Eventually, I orchestrated a moment that would catch them both off guard. A Sunday afternoon barbecue. A tradition among a few neighbors and friends. I invited Stephen, telling Rachel it was an olive branch, a chance for all of us to move forward. She looked at me as if I'd lost my mind, but didn't dare question me openly. Perhaps she thought I was truly trying to forgive. Stephen came, though he seemed wary. The tension in the backyard was palpable. I grilled burgers, made jokes, offered Stephen a beer. He accepted, looking cautious. Meanwhile, Rachel hovered anxiously, trying to read me. Halfway through the gathering, I projected a slideshow on a screen I'd set up, telling everyone it was a presentation about a charity project I was starting. The pictures began innocently enough. Photos of local community centers, donation drives. Then, before anyone could realize what was happening, I clicked to the next slide and images of text messages appeared on the screen. Fragments of conversation between Rachel and Stephen. They weren't the most explicit lines, but enough to suggest an affair. Gasping, Rachel tried to pull the projector plug, but she was too late. Some of the guests froze. Others quickly looked away, not believing what they were seeing. The hush was deafening. Rachel turned to me, shock and betrayal in her eyes. Stephen stood there, jaw clenched, color draining from his face. I turned off the projector after a few seconds, letting the silence speak for itself. Then I calmly announced, "So, that's the real charity, folks. My wife has been donating her time and affection to our dear friend Stephen here." It was a cruel line, but I said it. My voice trembled with a mix of triumph and self-loathing. A neighbor muttered an awkward apology, grabbed his wife, and left. People scattered, leaving behind cold plates of half-eaten food. Rachel tried to speak, but tears choked her words. Stephen looked at me, half angry, half ashamed. "Man, we didn't want." "Get out," I said quietly, cutting him off. "Both of you." That night, Rachel packed a small bag and left for a friend's place. She didn't even try to talk with me again. The next day, a torrent of calls from relatives, from my mother, from Rachel's mother. Everyone wanted to know what happened. I kept my answers short, telling them it was a personal matter. My mother demanded I come see her, so I did. She pressed. I deflected. She grew upset, eventually prying enough details from me. Her heartbreak was immediate. "How could Rachel do that?" she whispered. I sat in her living room, the same place where I had once spied on Rachel and Stephen, and felt a hollow ache. This was the cost of my revenge, spreading the pain, letting it devour everything in its path. My mother squeezed my hand. "I'm here for you, Michael. Always." I nodded, tears creeping into my eyes. For the first time since I discovered the affair, I allowed myself to cry in front of someone. In the days that followed, the sense of victory I'd felt at humiliating them evaporated. The phone calls and messages slowed, replaced by a haunting stillness. I found no comfort in my bed, so I spent nights dozing on the couch. The house felt empty, as though the soul of it had left with Rachel. She tried to call a few times, left voicemails. "Michael, please, we need to talk. I'll do anything to fix this." I deleted them unread. One afternoon, I walked into the bedroom, my heart pounding with memories. The sheets were new. I had thrown out the old ones, refusing to let them remind me of her betrayal. But the room still smelled faintly of her perfume. I stood there, looking at our wedding picture on the dresser. We seemed so happy on that day, so sure of our love. It was nauseating to see that naive version of myself grinning like a fool. I rummaged through the closet, found an old photo album with pictures of Rachel and me from college. Memories of simpler times. A younger me, scrawny, awkward, yet hopeful. And a younger Rachel, her eyes shining with the sort of untainted love I believed would last forever. Flipping through the pages, I realized that trust is not just a two-way street. It's also the scaffolding on which you build your shared dreams. Once the scaffolding collapses, the dreams come crashing down. What you're left with is rubble. Eventually, I did agree to meet Rachel in a neutral space, a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town. I arrived first, sitting by the window, watching cars pass. My reflection stared back at me, exhausted eyes, a heavy scowl etched into my features. I sipped black coffee, ignoring its bitter taste. Rachel walked in, eyes puffy from crying, or lack of sleep, or both. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, no makeup, hair tied back in a messy ponytail. The tension around us was thick enough to taste. She sat across from me, a hesitant silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry about everything." I met her gaze. "We've been over that." She swallowed, glancing around as if embarrassed. The cafe wasn't crowded, but there were enough people that we had to keep our voices low. "I'm filing for a separation," she said quietly, "unless you want to proceed with a divorce. I don't know how we salvage this." I gave a bitter chuckle. "And you think that's up to me?" She inhaled. Michael, you have to understand. I never wanted to humiliate you. I never wanted to break you. I was lonely. I was searching for something. It was the biggest mistake of my life. You said you were happy, remember? I asked, voice raw. I repeated her words softly. I am happy. You told me that, not long before everything blew up. Tears sprang to her eyes. That happiness was superficial. It wasn't real. I was telling myself a story. I was lying to myself as much as to you. I felt a pang in my chest. For a second, I almost reached out, wanting to wipe her tears. But I kept my hands firmly around my coffee cup. And now, here we are, I said. You, me, and a shattered marriage. She nodded, sniffing. Yes, I wish I could take it back. Even if you could, I said, I wouldn't want it anymore. That trust, it's gone. You used it against me. You turned it into a weapon. She looked away, guilt creasing her features. I know. A silence fell between us. The entire conversation felt like a duel where both sides had already taken mortal wounds. I wasn't sure what outcome I wanted anymore. Did I want her to suffer? Did I want her to cling to me, sobbing for forgiveness? Or did I want to walk away with some semblance of dignity? Stephen, I asked quietly, the name burning my tongue. Are you still? She shook her head vehemently. No. We ended it. I told him I couldn't continue. He left town, said he couldn't face you. I don't want him in my life anymore. I studied her expression. She seemed sincere, but sincerity from her now felt worthless. Good for you, I said. My tone was flat. I guess you have closure. She grimaced, tears slipping down her cheeks again. I don't have closure. I have regret. I stared at her, at the woman who had once been my entire world. Regret, I echoed, pushing the coffee away. We all do. We parted with no resolution. Just a vague understanding that things were broken beyond repair. That night, I lay awake in the stillness of an empty house. The euphoria I'd once imagined feeling at humiliating them was gone. In its place was a grinding hollowness, as though I had poured acid over my life and found satisfaction only in the moment of destruction. Now I was left with the aftermath, charred remains of what used to be a marriage, a home, a dream. The phone sat silent on the coffee table. No new messages, no calls, just the darkness. I found myself questioning everything. My identity, my value, the meaning of my entire adult life. For the first time, I realized my revenge had cost me more than I'd expected. I had seared any chance of gentle closure, any possibility of an amicable parting. I had also tainted my own sense of integrity. I got up, moved to the back porch, sat on a wooden chair, and stared at the night sky. The air was cool, a faint breeze rustling the bushes. I brought out the projector, displayed my wife's texts, in front of neighbors. That moment replayed in my mind, a savage spectacle that once felt justified. Now, it just felt cruel. Shame squeezed my chest. Sure, she deserved consequences. But in stooping to that public humiliation, I wondered if I had become something monstrous. A few days later, I visited my mother again. She must have sensed that my anger had cooled into a tired resignation. She held my hand as we sat on her small back porch. The autumn leaves were changing, bright reds and oranges swirling in the breeze. She gently said, I heard about that barbecue. Word gets around. Do you regret it, Michael? I sighed, looking out over her yard. Yes. And no. I regret the spectacle, but I don't regret exposing them. She nodded, pursing her lips. You're in pain. It's understandable. But be careful how long you hold on to that anger. It can poison you. I swallowed. You think I should forgive her? She shook her head gently. That's for you to decide. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean staying married or forgetting what happened. Sometimes forgiveness is more about letting go so you can move on, not for her sake, but for yours. I thought about that, feeling a lump rise in my throat. I don't know if I can. She squeezed my hand, offering a small, sad smile. "You're stronger than you think. Just don't lose yourself in revenge." I let her words sink in. A part of me, the part that was still reeling from betrayal, wanted to reject any notion of letting go. But another part, the exhausted part, just wanted peace. Rachel and I began the legal process, dividing assets, discussing how to proceed with a separation or divorce. We had no children, so that at least simplified the paperwork. My attorney asked if I wanted to go after her for spousal misconduct. In Ohio, where we lived, infidelity can sometimes influence certain aspects of divorce settlements, but it's not as straightforward as in older laws. Nonetheless, I had the folder of evidence, the screenshots, the proof. I could legally bury her if I wanted to. She was a freelance event planner. Her income was unstable. She'd rely on me for any substantial settlement. It was power in my hands. Another trust-turned-weapon. She met me in the lawyer's office, her gaze downcast. The attorney started listing potential strategies. I noticed Rachel trembling. It wasn't simple fear of losing money. Her eyes carried a deeper pain, the realization that she'd destroyed something valuable, something she might never rebuild. For a moment, I pictured myself slamming that final nail in her coffin, leaving her financially ruined, a cautionary tale for would-be adulterers. But then I remembered my mother's words. Don't lose yourself in revenge. I surprised both the lawyer and Rachel by saying, let's keep it fair. I don't need to be vindictive. Rachel lifted her eyes, brimming with tears of gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. I felt no triumph, only a dull ache. As the weeks slipped by, we arranged one last meeting at the house to finalize some possessions. She came on a Saturday afternoon, the sun low in the sky. I had stacked boxes in the foyer, labeled with her name. My heart pounded at the thought of seeing her rummage through our shared memories. She stepped inside, wearing a simple coat. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The air was thick with a history that neither of us could forget. She pointed to a small box. Is that my grandmother's vase? Yeah, I said. You left it in the living room. Thought you'd want to keep it. She nodded, tears threatening to surface again. Thank you. In the silence that followed, my mind drifted back to the day she had said, I am happy. How hollow those words were now. She sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I know you hate me, she murmured. I closed my eyes. Sometimes I do. Sometimes, I just hate what happened. She approached me, hesitantly placing a hand on my arm. I didn't pull away this time. Her voice trembled. I wish I could go back to before I ruined everything. But I can't. If I could snap my fingers and give you back that trust, I would. I repeated her words gently. Give me back that trust. They felt like a eulogy for our marriage. She nodded, tears sliding down. I'm so sorry. We stood there, inches apart, the final confrontation strangely subdued. No more screaming, no more damning evidence. Just two broken people acknowledging the end of something they once cherished. Then, I did something that surprised even me. I leaned forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. I believe you, I whispered. I believe you're sorry. But that doesn't change what you did, or how I feel. Her tears flowed freely then, and she covered her face with both hands. I gently moved her hands away, looked at her tear-streaked face. We can't go back, I said, voice thick with emotion. But maybe, eventually, we can both heal. Just, not together. She let out a shuddering sob, nodding. I understand. So that's how it ends, with her packing boxes into her car, leaving the driveway for the last time as my wife. No official goodbye kiss, no handshake, nothing that suggests a neat closure. Just the sound of an engine starting. And then she was gone. I watched the car disappear down the street, feeling both lighter and unbearably heavy. I had taken my revenge, publicly humiliating her and her lover. I had withheld counseling, toyed with her hopes of reconciliation, and in the end, I still felt hollow. I realized I had paid a steep price for that fleeting sense of retribution. I lost the person I thought I loved, and in the process, lost a part of myself. Now, I live alone in this house, my house. The fridge no longer has her grocery lists. The closet is half empty. The bed is all mine, cold and undisturbed on one side. I have the freedom I once claimed I wanted. The freedom to not be lied to. The freedom to not share my space with a betrayer. But it's a bitter freedom, haunted by memories I can't simply erase. I've considered leaving Cleveland, starting fresh. Yet something holds me here. A sense of duty, maybe, or just plain inertia. My mother still lives nearby, and I can't abandon her, not after everything. My sister calls from out of state, offering her home if I need a break, but I'm not sure running away will fix anything. Most days, I manage to function. I get up, go to work, counsel clients about their finances, come home, eat a solitary dinner, then watch TV until I drift off. At times, the anger resurfaces. Other times, I pity Rachel or pity myself for not seeing the signs earlier. Emotions coil and uncoil like snakes in my gut. Anger, pity, shock, regret. They're never truly gone, just dormant or overshadowed by daily tasks. Sometimes I recall the night I saw them in my bed. The erotic subtext that was never meant for my eyes. I feel a stab of jealousy, then a wave of sorrow. It's a brand on my psyche, a memory forever etched in my mind. But I also remember the look on her face in the coffee shop, the sincerity of her tears, and it twists the knife of regret deeper. Maybe if I'd been more attentive, more open to her needs, she wouldn't have strayed. Then again, maybe some people just crave that thrill, and no amount of attention can stop them. I'm learning, slowly, that revenge doesn't fill the hole betrayal creates. It might momentarily satisfy a raw rage, but in the aftermath, you're left with the same emptiness, plus a new regret for stooping so low. The damage is done, either way. Will I ever trust again? That's a question I can't answer. Right now, the very thought of trust feels like a loaded weapon, something that can be turned against me in a heartbeat. Maybe in time, with healing and reflection, I'll lay down that weapon and allow someone into my life. But for now, the memory of Rachel whispering, "I am happy," haunts me. I hear it late at night, a mocking echo that reminds me how fragile our illusions can be. I sit here, in a quiet house, penning these thoughts, my final attempt to purge the poison from my veins. I'm not sure if it's working. Yet, I sense a flicker of determination. I want to rebuild, somehow, even if the cost was high. Even if part of me will always resent her. I end this story with a realization that what I sought, vengeance, some grand sense of justice, brought no lasting relief. There is no neat bow to tie around a shattered marriage. All I have is the truth. I was betrayed. I inflicted my own brand of pain in return. And now I must live with the consequences. But I am alive. Scared, bitter, changed, but alive. And that perhaps is enough for now.